So, who should I vote for? The Bible speaks about voting in the Old Testament books of Moses, the wisdom books, as well as in the New Testament gospel and epistles. It talks about who we should vote for and the consequences of bad leadership. Much of the world's suffering, much of the suffering we face is because of godless leadership. We vote for leaders who tell us things that sound good. And sometimes, frankly, we vote for people who tell us stuff that doesn't even sound good, but they say it loud enough that we follow them. And we're absolutely, though, and make no mistake about it, for all of our leaders, good, bad, and indifferent, we're to pray for them. But we're also told that there are bad leaders. Look at Israel. Look at Judah. Look at Nebuchadnezzar. Look at Jezebel. The best way to prevent bad leadership is not to vote it in. It's great to protest when things go wrong, but you can alleviate some of the need for some of that protesting by making sure you get the right people in place. Vote for the right people. Now, Deuteronomy 1:13 tells us, choose for your tribes. Gives us three criteria here, and we're going to actually add a fourth from another verse. But you're looking for wise, you're looking for understanding, and you're looking for experienced men, and God will appoint them your heads, right? Wise, understanding, and experienced. Proverbs 29:2 tells us, when the righteous increase, the people will rejoice, but when the wicked rule, the people will suffer. They will groan. So let's break this down. Jesus instructed us in the New Testament as he was sending out his men, his men two by two, on what he was looking for. But let's say this again. From the Old Testament, wise, understanding, experienced, and righteous, right? So now, as Jesus sent out his men, he said to them, behold, I send you forth as sheep in the midst of wolves. So you're going out as sheep amidst wolves. How's that set up? You send some sheep out amongst wolves. What's going to happen to them sheep? They're going to get slaughtered. But he sends them out as serpents, as wise as serpents, and harmless as doves. So he's sending them out amongst the predators, those who are predisposed and ready to take them down. He sends them out, though, as wise as serpents and harmless as doves. And Jesus uses these similes, these figures of speech, to instruct his disciples on how to behave themselves in their ministry. He tells them, be wise as serpents and harmless as doves. He warns them that they are being sent out like sheep among wolves. So what does that tell us? Like in today's world, people were purposefully hostile to the believers. So Jesus instructed them that they needed to be, they needed to know how to advance the kingdom of God effectively without becoming predatory or hunters like the wolves that they were going out to. So though it's a dog-eat-dog world, he taught them that they must combine the wisdom of a serpent with the harmlessness of a dove. I keep saying this because I wanted to kind of penetrate. Wisdom of a serpent with harmlessness of a dove. The serpent is subtle, it's crafty, right? The dove is innocent and harmless. They're used for sacrifices. They're listed as one of the clean animals in Leviticus, and they're the symbol of peace, right? Doves are the symbol of doves are the symbol of peace. So he's telling them that they were sent out to the world, that they must be wise and avoid its trappings. And that's everything from bribery to evil doing to we can go down the litany of sins. Frankly, just think about the things that befall our current politicians. But be wise and shrewd. But then also don't fall into the trappings of those who oppose you. Be wise to see those things coming. Think Jesus during the Passion Week, as the Sanhedrin came to him, how wise he was to not fall into their trappings. He was definitely a snake. He was crafty. He was subtle in those moments. Wisdom is not being dishonest, conniving, or smooth-talking trickster, but remember that innocence is not akin to being gullible and soft. But let's use Jesus as an example of being that snake and the dove. And mind you now, he was definitely a gentle person. And it tells us in Matthew 12:20 that he couldn't even quench a smoking flask. But was he always gentle? No. Well, when the time demanded it, he took a whip in his hand and chased the money changers out of the temple, right? He stood up to Pontius Pilate. He wasn't aggressive, but he stood up to him, backed down, did not back down. On the rare occasion, he showed power of a snake and dove combination. The gentle, wise Jesus spoke confidently, assertively with the authority in the temple. Jesus was wise as a serpent in how he taught. He knew enough how to talk to his audience and use parables to feed his followers and weed out the frauds. He refused to be trapped by his enemies. I keep saying that, but that's part of wisdom, refusing and staying away from the traps that the world has set. Now, Jesus is obviously God incarnate, was a living example, but the Apostle Paul also modeled the wise as serpent and harmless as dove. He embodied that example. Paul lived like a dove in innocence in good conscience before God, Acts 23:1, and learned to deny his carnal desires, to jeopardize his ministry. Think about the fact that, think about what you have to do. If you're going to be a leader, if you're going to be out in the spotlight, you should at least deny yourself some of the things that would just carnally give you pleasure, because it sort of defeats the message you're trying to send. How does it look think about the number of pastors that have fallen because of indulgence in their carnal desires. It's incumbent upon leaders to deny themselves many things in order to have people righteously follow them. But Paul also displayed serpent-like shrewdness when he needed it. He knew his legal rights and used the legal system to his advantage. He spoke meticulously and impactfully to groups with great effectiveness. Just go through Acts 16 through 25. It's just laid out with example of Paul engaging the other disciples as well as the government. We need to vote for wise and harmless individuals, ones who are serpents and doves. But we also need understanding. We need wisdom. We need understanding in our leaders. The beginning of wisdom is this: get wisdom, right? The beginning of wisdom is get wisdom. Though it costs all you have to get understanding. So to get wisdom, you've got to get understanding. Proverbs 18:2 states, "Fools find no pleasure in understanding, but delight in airing their own opinions." In other words, they just run in their mouth. Understanding requires listening, watching, observing, studying, researching, spending time getting to know your subject, as in details pertaining to the matter at hand, or subject specific, meaning the people you serve. Not the people that serve you, the people you serve. Understanding is comprehending, apprehending the ideas or sense of someone or something. Simply put, understanding is getting it. I understand English. I don't understand Mandarin. I understand why people like Marvel movies. I don't understand why people like musicals. People running around singing. I understand men. I'm a man. Been married for a long time. Got 4 daughters. I don't understand women. Now, understanding helps substantially with compassion, but it allows for better judgment. The Apostle Peter counseled Christians to have compassion for one another, love his brothers, be tenderhearted, be courteous. He also encouraged empathy when he exhorted fellow Christians to rejoice with those who rejoice. Rejoice with those who rejoice, but also mourn. Mourn with those who mourn. That's what understanding allows you to be able to do. We need leaders who understand what is going on, who understand how it affects us all. So we need wisdom. We need wise leaders. We need understanding leaders. Thirdly, we need experience. I think it's pretty straightforward. Experience is knowledge derived from trials, use, practice, or from a series of observations. Someone who's been through some things, right? Who has had experiences personally or vicariously. People who have toiled amongst other people. People with enough experience to realize that they've not done or seen it all, and need other people with experience so that they can do what they're setting out to do even better. Think about it. Jesus didn't gather his 12 disciples and send them off immediately on the Great Commission. He required that they spent time with him before he commissioned them. They needed to experience Jesus before they could preach about him. It's hard to lead people well that you have no experience with. Most of our governing officials have some sort of residency requirement, right? The mayor of New York must live in New York for 5 years prior to the election day. 5 years prior to election day. They must experience the city they wish to govern. And I mean the geography of the city as well as the people of the city. A congressman from the 2nd District in California must live in the 2nd District in California. They must have experience living amongst the people they will lead. Now, there is no statutory requirement that elected officials have prior government experience, but it doesn't mean that we must not require it as voters for particular offices. Now, we're told constantly that all kings are given power by God. All right. Now, we don't have a king, but we have a president, a governor, we have mayors, and so forth. But the power they have is given by God, and we are to honor their power. But we also know that all leaders are not led by God. And when we have to make the decision between following a corrupt leader, following a leader who's doing wrong, and following what it is that God has charged us to do, who are you following? The creator or the faker? I mean, you can call it whatever you want to. It's just straight up God or the government leader. Who are you following? And we know they're bad leaders. I mean, point blank. I laid it out earlier. Look at Israel. God's chosen people. The kingdom went up and it fell. And it did that a couple of times. Judah. And I mean, the Old Testament is chock full of bad leaders. Israel cries out to me. Our God, we acknowledge you, but Israel has rejected what is good. An enemy will pursue him. And this is God speaking. They set up kings without my consent. They chose princes without my approval. At the top of that, I read, Israel cries out to me. And it finished with, they set up kings without my consent. They chose princes without my approval. In other words, because they chose bad leaders, they suffered. In other words, choose leaders who are God approved, wise, understanding, experienced, and lastly, righteous. So righteous. What's righteous? Ezekiel 18:5-9 lays it out pretty well for us. If a man is righteous and does what is right and just, if he does not eat upon the mountains or lift his eyes to the idols of the house of Israel, does not defile his neighbor's wife or approach a woman in her time of menstrual impurity, does not oppress anyone, but restores the debtor his pledge, commits no robbery, gives his bread to the hungry and covers the naked with a garment, does not lend at interest or take any profit, withholds his hand from injustice, executes true justice between man and man, walks in my statutes and keeps my rules by acting faithfully, he is righteous. He shall surely live, declares the Lord God. Now, we all fall short, but we need to elect people who are at least trying to be so, who fear God, who people who are trying to be so, who fear God and who are righteous, who commit no robbery, gives his bread to the hungry, and covers the naked with garments, who do not overtax, does not withhold executing justice, but execute it between every man, who loves his neighbor, which is the totality of all the commandments, by being faithful to God. So as we're bombarded with the propaganda of the two major parties, neither of which is perfect or has a monopoly on the righteousness that God requires of our leaders, get past the political affiliations and the selfish interests and seek out, let's say it, wise, understanding, knowledgeable, and righteous people to lead. Much of our suffering is caused by bad leadership. So don't vote them in.